Hello and welcome to part 3 of a little mini-series in which I'm just introducing several concepts relating to building a panel and then to scripting of panels within Air Manager. And in this part we're going to look at scrolling panels, which is essentially moving the elements of your panel around on screen. One reason for doing that is that it essentially allows you to add a lot more real estate to your screen, to your monitor, and you can have a panel that is much bigger than your monitor size. So why would you want to do that? Well, some people build panels that fit instruments that they want to use in specific phases of flight or to suit their own preferences. I tend to like to build my panels to reflect the layout of the original aircraft. Neither way's right or wrong. Everyone has particular ways of doing that they prefer to do things. In my case, if I take here, for example, I've got the captain side panel for the 737-300 showing here. The full panel is too large for a monitor. And the way I get around that is by being able to essentially move the panel around so that if I want the lights down at the bottom of the panel, they're there. If I want a view that gives me my basic flight instruments, that's there. If I want to go to the top of the panel, there we go. Or I can drag the panel up and down, or I can use a dial to move the panel up and down. And if you have a knobster available, then you could use your knobster to control that dial. There's 3 different ways that I've worked to do it. They're all available in the panel files, in the scroll files for my packaged aircraft. Some people may have a preference for the method that they wish to use. I'm going to introduce the concepts. I'm going to show you the panel scripting files that I use, and I'm going to modify them so that they work with that very basic 4-instrument panel that we showed you in part 1. Let's keep it simple. Start with 4 instruments, it keeps the coding nice and short, you can see exactly what's involved, and then you can just scale that up as much as you like to fit your own needs. This is not by any means the definitive way of doing things. This is my way of doing things. There may be better ways. Again, if anyone has a more efficient way of doing this or an alternate way of doing this, then please let us know, because I would love to know, and I'd be more than happy to change my own practices and my own way of doing things if there is a better and more efficient way of doing it. Close this panel down, and we have the Air Manager Beta 4.2, now Beta 35. Funny, it came up with a new beta available, and I thought I downloaded it and installed it, which I shouldn't have done. But it's still showing me 35 there, so I don't know whether something's gone on with their numbering or whether it hasn't installed the latest beta, but nonetheless it seems to be working okay, so let's go with it. So we have YouTube Demo and we have YouTube Demo Part 2, and I'm going to run with YouTube Demo just for now, and like I say, just stick with the 4 instruments. Let's keep it simple. So I'll clone that. There's the clone. Go up to Info, rename it Part 3. Voila. And just to show you, there we are. There are the 4 instruments. Nothing special, no functionality, just straight 4 instruments. On to panel scrolling. How do I do it? Well, it's a 2-part process. I have an element of panel scripting, but I also have an instrument that contains the controls for scrolling or moving the panels. In my case, they're all named scroll, just an obvious way to name them. Captain Panel Scroll is the instrument that I use for captain side. Again, let me clone that, and if I can find it, let me just type scroll in again here and filter them down. There we go. panel scroll clone. And I'll rename that. So into info. It's the same with instruments as it is for panels. So I'll go in here and I'm just going to call that YouTube panel scroll. Voila. And now if I type in YouTube, it shows me the panel scroll instrument, which isn't yet modified so won't work, and it shows me the 3 panels, demo panels that I've built so far. Well, what we'll do now then is show you how I can modify this instrument and the panel scripting so that we can scroll that 4 instrument panel up and down. In fact, you could also make it scroll left and right if you really wanted to. The principle is exactly the same. I haven't needed to on this occasion, but there are certain panels, like for example the Flight Engineers panel, where you may wish to move your panel sideways, up and down and sideways. Principle is exactly the same. All you have to do is move the X coordinates as well as moving the Y coordinates, and in this case all I'm going to do is move the Y coordinates and shift the panel up and down to show you the principle. This is an invisible instrument. I should have said that right at the start. This is an invisible instrument. It sits on top of the panel and it allows the controls to be accessible, but you'll see nothing. You won't see any dials or anything, any visual representation other than your mouse or your touch visual representation that there's anything actually there. We'll open up the script. As you saw earlier in this video, there are 3 methods that I use to control being able to scroll or move the panel. The first one was the scroll bar on the left. The second one was that dial or knob on the top left hand corner where I positioned it. You could position it anywhere you want, which could be controlled either with your mouse or with the knobster. And then the third way was actually with buttons, the 3 buttons on the right hand side of the screen. So let me just take you through that and show you the principle of how it works. Let's take a look at that scroll bar on the left first. First thing you'll see there is this line here, var-60 underscore, sorry, var_601. And what I'm doing there is I'm creating an Air Manager internal variable, an SI variable, create, and I'm calling that Captain Panel Scroll. It's an integer value and the default is 0. And essentially in this case, this value here, Captain Panel Scroll, is the amount of offset or the amount of change on the y-axis that we're going to put into the panel to make everything move. I guess that's probably the simplest way I can describe it. We start off with the default Captain Panel Scroll is 0. We're going to add a scroll wheel, which is a standard Air Manager element. We're going to put that, sorry, let's go back a stage. There's no image associated with that scroll wheel or scroll bar, I suppose you could call it. You can add one if you want, but we don't need one here. It's going to be right on the left hand side of the screen with 0 pixels from the left hand side. It's going to start 150 pixels down from the top, and there's a reason for that I'll talk about in a minute. It's going to be 100 pixels wide, gives you enough space to be able to get your mouse in there or your finger without any problems. 1290 pixels high, and I'll be honest, I cannot remember what the 50 and the 50 relate to, but I think they relate to how the scroll performs, how fast it is, something like that. So apologies, I told you this wasn't going to be a definitive set of instructions as to how to make things work. Anyway, we've added our scroll wheel. That's now a function Captain Scroll, And then I'm going to say, if the direction of scroll is -1, then I'm going to add 40 pixels to this Y offset. If the scroll direction is +1, then I'm going to take off 40 pixels from that Y value or Y offset. In other words, every time I click down on that scroll bar, it moves everything up by 40 pixels. Every time I click on the up on that scroll bar, it moves everything down by 50 pixels. Now, actually, I say up and down, it's actually reversed, because the 0 refers to the top of the screen in this case, and a negative takes you up above the screen, and a plus takes you down further away from the top of the screen in a down direction. So I hope I've not confused you too much by saying that. The next line, the var cap, defines the limits of that offset on the y-axis. So the minimum is 0. In other words, I have this so that I use the top of the captain's panel as my reference point. I can't go above that, but I can essentially move the panel down 980 pixels. So on my screen here, which is 2560 pixels wide and 1440 pixels high, so I've actually added an extra 980 pixels of vertical real estate that I can use to display my captain's panel. And then this final line here that says every time I press that and I move by 40 pixels, I rewrite this manager variable, captain panel scroll, by that new value so that it remembers it, and the next time I press, the change of 40 up or down will relate to that new position. So every time you press, it will rewrite, it will send this captain panel scroll value around the network to the panel script file that you'll see in a minute, and it just keeps running then in a continuous cycle while you've got the panel open. So that's the scroll bar, and the principle is pretty much exactly the same for everything else. I said before that we started 150 pixels down from the top, so our scroll bar started sort of somewhere, you can see my mouse here on the left, somewhere around here. And the reason for that is I wanted a little gap at the top left hand corner so I could put this dial in as the second method of changing the y-axis deviation, scrolling up and down. And essentially with that second method, I've added this dial. It's right in the top left hand corner of the screen at 0x 0y. It's 125 pixels wide and 125 pixels tall. And I've called that captain adjust. First one captain scroll, second one captain adjust. And that works as a standard dial then within Air Manager. So we have the function, and I say that if I turn the dial anti-clockwise one step, then it will add 40 pixels to the scroll offset value. There's the same limitation, the var cap, and there's it writing the new value to the Air Manager variable. If I turn the dial clockwise, then it takes off 40 pixels, exactly the same. And then finally, I've written these buttons, and it may well be that you actually find, particularly with overhead panels and pedestals, that the button method is actually the best way to move your panels around, because it's a single mouse click or it's a single finger press if you're using a touchscreen, and it's a positive action. There's no ifs or buts or maybes, or maybe it's a couple of pixels out or whatever. It's straight there. What we have then with the buttons is we have 3 buttons added. Button add captain up pressed, kept in mid pressed, kept in down pressed. With buttons, you can have actions that happen when you press a button. You can have actions that happen when you release a button. In this case, all I want to do is press that button and it moves the screen to a particular place. The buttons are added 2460 pixels across, so right on the right hand side of the screen. They're 100 pixels wide, so again you've got enough space there to be able to push the button with your mouse or with your finger. There's one button at the top, 2460 is where it starts. It's 100 pixels wide, it's 300 pixels high. The next button is 100 pixels wide, 800 pixels high, and then the lower button is 100 wide and 300 high. There's a function then for each button press, and what that does simply is it says, okay, you press the up button, then you write to this panel scroll offset variable the value 0. In other words, there's no offset from the top of the screen. If you press the middle one, you write 250 pixels, and it immediately moves the screen down 250 pixels. Or in fact, what it is doing is moving the screen up 250 pixels, but your view is moving down. And then finally, if you want to see the bottom of the screen where the light controls are, it writes 900 pixels. So it's offset the screen vertically by 900 pixels. So that is the panel scroll. And I think I'll leave it like that. I'm not going to modify this. You can see how it works. It's possible, of course, to change things. If I wanted the scroll bar or I wanted the adjust knob to go in smaller steps, then I change the 40 to, let's say, 20, and it would move in steps of 20 pixels or 10 pixels. And again, with the buttons down here, if I wanted it to move to different positions, then I just change this value here. So instead of it being 250 pixels, it could move by 300 pixels. You just adjust them to fit your setup. You adjust the size and the position of the buttons or the scroll or the dial to exactly where you want them and how big you want them. And you adjust how much of that vertical adjustment, vertical deviation, that scroll amount that you actually want it to show. That's the panel scroll instrument. Very, very simple. You don't need all three of those methods on your panel. You may prefer one, in which case, if you don't want the dial or you don't want the scroll bar and all you want are the buttons, just delete these bits. Or if you want the scroll bar and not the others, just delete them. All three are there on my panels because it gives a user the option to decide which they want to use. So let's close that down, and we'll now go to our YouTube demo panel part 3. And what I'm going to do is I'm now going to add in, so we'll go to info, I'm now going to add in that panel scroll instrument. So we'll add that. It's now there. Left 0, top 0. So it's here. It's sized for the size of my panel. If you want to use this on your own custom monitor, then you'd want to change the size of the instrument. To show you that, go into info. You change the width and the height to match the dimensions, the resolution rather, of your monitor. And then when you go to the panel, you just make sure that that instrument is sized full size for your monitor. So again, the width and the height would be adjusted to suit the specifics of your monitor. if we open this YouTube demo part 3 panel, run that, we'll now see that there's a dial at the top. We'll see that there's a scroll wheel on the left, and we'll see buttons on the right. They don't do anything yet because we haven't set them up, but they're there. They're in place. Stop that. Now we go into script and we'll open up the script. There's no script here because I haven't got those buttons that we did in part 2 in here. We've literally just placed these 4 instruments in the panel, and I've done that deliberately because I want to keep this simple and just show you the scroll function. So let's add some script now to this panel to make those controls work. Here is the script from that Continental panel that's included in part of the package. I'm going to use that to show you how this all works, and I'm just going to copy, Control C, and paste, Control V. There we go. And now let's modify this so that it matches the specifics of the panel that we're building here. The first thing we want to do is within the script is we need to define which instruments are involved in this scripting process. We have scroll, we have ASI, we have an RMI, we have an altimeter, and we have a VSI, showing TCAS here, which is what Continental Airlines had. I'm going to change that, and I'm going to make that VSI. So those are the 4 instruments and the scroll instrument. Now, as you may have seen in video part 2, we're just now going to change these parameters. So we're going to have everything visible, and we're now going to set the order in which these are visible. So I'm going to go number 1 for the ASI, I'm going to go number 2 for the RMI, I'm going to go number 3 for the order number 3 for the altimeter, and I'm going to go 4 for the VSI, and then I'm going to go 5 for the scroll. So the scroll instrument is going to be on top of everything. We can delete all of these, we don't need them. Also, we'll delete this bit here, which is show hide the glare shield, which was using a button akin to how we did things in part 2, which shows or hides the autopilot controls, the glare shield of the aircraft. So we'll hide that. Before I do any more, what I need to do is check that these UUIDs, the Air Manager ID, internal ID for the instrument, is correct. And in order to do that, I open up the info box of the panel, go back to my Lua file. Let's take them in turn. Right click, copy. I'll just move that across there in a second. Copy, paste. They're probably the same, but I'm just going to copy the VSI, paste. Same for the RMI. Paste. And then finally for the ASI. Whoops, let's make sure I do the right one. There we go. So we have now told the panel script that these 5 instruments, one of them of course invisible, the scroll instrument, that they are all part of this process. They're all visible, even though this is invisible, but the panel can still see it, still knows it's there, and they're to be drawn in this particular order. And the reason is then that the controls for the scroll are always above anything that might be below them. You're not going to lose a button because there's an instrument behind it. Okay, let's now just add the scroll function. First thing, right at the bottom, is that we are telling this panel that it is to read the following data ref. And it is an internal Air Manager data ref, so we have the prefix variable subscribe. SI means it's internal, it's an Air Manager data ref. If it was an X-Plane one, we'd have X-Plane in there. It's called Captain Panel Scroll, if you recall from the panel scroll instrument where we defined that data ref. It's an integer value, and for the purposes of this script here, we'll call it Captain Scroll. So function Captain Scroll, and then in order to make that function work, this is the name that's in there, as you can see for the rest of it. Let me delete this line here. This was actually in there for ensuring that the master caution and the fire warnings on the glare shield didn't move down if you had a scroll value set below a certain value. It's getting a little bit complicated. It's not needed. You can see I'd actually remmed it out by putting 2 dashes in front of the line because I didn't use that function. I didn't need to use that in the Continental panel. So I'll just take that out. So now we just want to put the instructions in to make these things move. We have the ASI, we'll leave that in. We don't have an ADI, a background, we don't have any of those. We have an RMI, so we'll leave that in. ASI, RMI. We need an altimeter and a VSI, which I'll include here. VSI. We have defined which instruments are part of this process. We have told the system that it needs to look up that movement value, the Captain Panel Scroll value that's being calculated by whether you press buttons or move dials in the scroll instrument. And now finally we're going to tell this panel where we want these instruments moved to. First one, the ASI. The instruments don't move left or right, so the left 500 will stay the same. The top 350 minus the value of this y-axis change, and it's minus because we're starting at the top, and as we add an amount of y movement in pixels, we're actually moving up above the screen, so it's a minus. Again, apologies, I'm not explaining it terribly well, but that's just try it. Believe me, just try it. Right, the RMI then, we'll just set that up. That's at 500. That's at 870, and again, these are the values that I have set on my panel. You will need to change these to match what you have set on your own custom panel. We've got the altimeter is 1500 and the top is at 350, and then finally we've got the VSI with the left, the x-axis at 1500, and the y would be at, I say that would be at 780. There we go. File, save. To make this work properly, I need to run this from the Home tab. So I'll go to the Home tab, I will add a panel, I will filter with YouTube Demo Part 3. It's full screen, 2560 by 1440. I'll add it and I'll run it by clicking on the light bulb. There's our panel. Now, fingers crossed, this works. We go up to the dial first, and there we go. Every time we click, we move up or down, depending on what the perspective is that you're looking at, by 40 pixels. We can move the scroll bar. Every time we move that scroll bar, we're going up and down 40 pixels. We've got our 3 buttons. That's the default. No movement. We've moved up, I think it was 250 pixels if memory serves me right. Click the bottom one, we've moved up 900 pixels. And again, if you remember from looking at that script file, you can change those to match your own screen resolution. That's it. It's as simple as that. And once again, if you prefer just the buttons, because they're a good solid one click takes you there, just use the buttons. Delete the code for the dial, delete the code for the scroll wheel, and you can put those buttons on the right hand side, you can put them on the left hand side, you could put those buttons anywhere you like. That's it. Very, very easy. It's very simple. I hope this is just the start for you. You can do multiple things with panel scrolling. It's very, very easy to take instruments, the pre-made instruments, place them where you want them on your panel, and then be able to manipulate them to do what you want to do for your cockpit setup. Once again, I hope that this has dispelled any fears that you might have about the fact that your monitors may not be the same as mine, may not be 2560 by 1440. It doesn't matter. You can take those instruments that come with the package, you can place them how you want, you can make them do what you want. Good place to find out a lot more information is the AirManager wiki, and I'll put a screenshot up of that. There we go. You can go there, you'll see examples of code, you'll see examples of the different functions that are available. Just give it a try. You can't break AirManager, you can't really break X-Plane by doing this. Just play with it and spend a day, 2 days, and you'll find that the dividends that you get back from doing that pay off massively, because you can, like I say, you can make your cockpit work the way that you want it to work. That's it for now. Hope you enjoyed it. Have fun. To all those who bought our panels, thank you very much. Hope you're having loads of fun with them, and just happy simming.